welcome to Mimi's house. Usually on this day is a story that I read from a book, but I'm going to tell you a story and then I have a poem that I'd like to share with you. But first, I would like to go to the Bible in the Old Testament, and this is the book of Proverbs. And it's in the 17th chapter, verse 6. Children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. When it says children's children, that means grandchildren. And I bet a lot of you have grandparents. And believe it or not, when I was a little girl, I had two grandmas, and I wanted to share with you some stories about my grandmas today, and then read a poem to you about grandma's shoes. If you ever notice, sometimes grandma's shoes are a little different, and they really were different back at the time. Okay, I'll share with you. I wrote some things down that I wanted to tell you about. I had my grandma Manley both of my grandmas were a very good cook. But the comfort food that I remember so much from my grandma Manley was her making corn fritters. And I wish I had the recipe. I don't. In fact, I wish I had any recipe with her handwriting, and that would be awesome. But I don't. Corn fritters, somehow she would throw these together. I never saw her use a recipe, and obviously it had corn in it, and they were just about so big around, and she fried them in a skillet on both sides. And then when she'd bring them to the table, we'd slather butter on them and pour syrup over them, and you didn't care if you had anything else. That was all you wanted when she fixed corn fritters. The other thing was, and this sounds so simple, but it was always just good. And that was a tuna casserole, and she would bake it in the oven, and she would put Ritz crackers on top. She wouldn't crush up the crackers. She'd use the round crackers and put the round crackers all the way across the top of the casserole, and then bake it in the oven. The other thing that was so good at her house was brownies. She was excellent at making brownies. And I don't know if that's where I developed the love for chocolate that I have or not, but we'd have brownies and the ice cream that's chocolate ice cream. It was lime with chocolate in it, chocolate pieces in it. Green ice cream with chocolate pieces. Mint flavored, mint chocolate. That was so good with the brownies. And instead, if she would be surprised, instead of saying, "Oh my land," or anything like that, it was always, "Oh my goodness gracious sakes alive." I have yet to hear anybody put all of those things together for a comment. It was, "Oh my goodness gracious sakes alive." And I don't know why you remember silly things like that, but you do. And at the time we moved back here from Georgia, then I went to Alcott School, and she was just a block away. And so I would walk to her house at noon to eat lunch. And it's a wonder I'm still alive, because I would come in and I'd say, oh yeah, I got to take cookies back to school today. And she'd go, what? Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness gracious sakes alive. You're kidding. You have to take cookies back today? This afternoon? And she'd whip out some cookies, and then she'd say, now don't do that to me again. You tell me when you have to have something. And so, oh yeah, okay, Grandma, oh yeah, I will. And I remember one time I came in and I said, oh yeah, we're doing a play this afternoon on George Washington, and I have to be Martha Washington, and I need a costume. It was another one of those, oh my goodness gracious sakes alive, because we had to go upstairs, and she had a big trunk up there, and it had old clothes in it. And I remember it was a black dress that she pulled out of there and somehow put together for me to wear, to take back for that play that afternoon. But the other thing was we had to do something for Martha's hair. And so that was before cotton balls. And cotton used to come in a box, in a really long string of cotton. And so what she did was took that cotton and wrapped it around my head to look like Martha Washington's hair. And of course I got the same warning. Now, don't do this to me again. You got to tell me in advance what to expect. But those were some precious, precious memories. And my grandma Caldwell had a jewelry box, and I would go to stay all night with her, and I would invariably want to dig through and try on and get all of that jewelry and look at it and pull it out. And I'm wondering if maybe because of her love of jewelry is why I have a love of jewelry for myself. I don't know if I've passed that on to anybody else in our family, but she loved jewelry and she loved bright colors, and so do I. And one of the best things that we did at Grandma Caldwell's was every Easter she would let me invite all the neighborhood kids and all the kids from my Sunday school class and anybody else that I wanted to invite to her house, and we would color Easter eggs. I don't know where she came about all these eggs. She had a source for supplying eggs, and she cooked them, getting them ready for us to color. And that kitchen was just wall-to-wall kids, and it was complete chaos. And she was as calm as could be, because she seemed to thrive on chaos. And she loved the idea of it, having all these people around and having a party and being the hostess to such an event. And one of the things that she made in her cooking was crescent rolls, and she made homemade loaves of bread. And I remember going to her house one time, and I said, Grandma, why are you still making this bread that you got to cut? Don't you know you can go to the store now and you can get bread that's already sliced? And what a silly thing that is to say now for people who love homemade bread. And one of the things, though, that she made was crescent rolls. And she would roll the dough out in a big circle and then cut triangles out in that circle and start at the back side, the bigger part of that triangle, and roll it up, and then you curve it just a little bit like this when you lay it down on the baking sheet. And hers were so big, and so they were just delicious. If there was ever a church bazaar, they would be the first thing that would be sold out. And it got so that people would call her and ask, are you going to be making any of those crescent rolls? I'd sure like to buy some. And she probably could have set up a bakery of just making only that crescent roll, because it was fabulous. It was awesome. It was great. I do have one of her recipes that she wrote. And she wrote it on the back of an envelope. And I went ahead and framed it. And it is in my kitchen because it is in my grandma's handwriting, and it happens to be for her crescent rolls. And that was a very special recipe, and very special that I have that recipe. Well, the poem that I'd like to read you today is talking about grandma's shoes. And at the time that my grandmas, they didn't wear like what grandmas now wear, slacks or jeans and tennis shoes. No, grandmas back in that time wore a kind of a lace-up shoe, but it had a little bit of a heel on it. And they were made out of leather, and they were either brown or black. That was it. Most generally black. So here is the poem about grandma shoes. All the grandmas that I knew all walked around this world in ugly grandma shoes. You know, the ones I speak of, those black, clunky heeled kind that just looked so very awful that it weighed upon my mind. For I knew when I grew old, I'd have to wear those shoes. I'd think of that from time to time. It seemed like such bad news. I never was a rebel. I wore saddle shoes to school, and next came ballerinas, then the sandals. Pretty cool. And then came spikes with pointed toes. Then platforms, very tall. At each new fashion came along, I wore them, one and all. But always in the distance, looming in my future there, was that awful pair of ugly shoes, the kind that grandmas wear. I eventually got married, and then I became a mom. Our kids grew up and left, and when their children came along, I knew I was a grandma, and the time was drawing near when those clunky, black, old lace-up shoes was what I'd have to wear. How would I do my gardening or take my morning bike? I couldn't even think about how I would go on a hike. But fashions kept evolving, and one day I realized that the shape of things to come was changing right before my eyes. And now, when I go shopping, what I see fills me with glee. For in my jeans and Reeboks, I'm as comfy as can be. And I look at all these teenage girls, and there, upon their feet, are clunky black old grandma shoes. And they think they're really neat. Isn't that true how fashions come and go, and what goes around comes around? And now fashions that young girls are wearing remind me of those old clunky, ugly grandma shoes. Well, I hope that you've had a good time with me today telling you about my grandmas. And I hope that it will make you think of some of the wonderful times that you get to spend with your grandmas. And if they're a Mimi or a Nona or Nana, Mima, whatever you call your grandma, make some special times together. I love you. I will see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock at Mimi's house. Bye-bye.